earnings. What matters more here?
I mean, the whole story is about gross margins. I mean, that's really been the headwind on Tesla stock. I'd say $30 to $40 of a headwind to the stock. You saw gross margins. I mean, this is a blowout. Not even us thought that we could see a gross margin, what essentially is anywhere from a 200 to 300 bit beat. This shows price cuts now under control. Margins start to tick back up. You start to get now toward 20% gross margins. I think this is the start of the stock ultimately. This will have a 3 in front of it as a stock as the gross margins start to trend up and as well as growth into next year from a delivery perspective.
So does the robo-taxi stuff matter?
Look, I think longer term, I would think the longer term story here is autonomous, is robotics, is essentially the AI play. Street, what they needed to see here, show me margins. You cannot have margins going toward 13, 14%. Now that margins are starting to level off, that is so important, not just from a cash flow perspective, but showing the worst is in the rearview mirror. And when you think about all the bears and all the negatives, it comes down to deliveries will start to uptick. China, I think, is a source of strength in the quarter. But that gross margin, it's a Goldilocks for any bear. Okay, it's a Goldilocks for any bull. The bears, it's kind of a nightmare for, because that was ultimately the core of the story.
Yeah, to your point, free cash flow, $2.74 billion. That trounced expectations for Q3. But some of the details we're getting here on the outlook, I think, are also really notable. They're basically saying, despite the ongoing macroeconomic conditions, we expect to achieve slight growth in vehicle deliveries in 2024. Also talking about energy storage deployments that are going to more than double this year. But perhaps this is most notable because I know you've written about this, saying plans for new vehicles, including more affordable models, remain on track for start of production in the first half of 2025. What should we take away from that when I know a lot of folks have been looking for a sub $30,000 vehicle? We're even expecting to get some details on that at the Robotaxi event, which maybe was unrealistic.
The linchpin to the story from a growth is a sub 30K vehicle. And I believe that that hits by middle of 2025. That's the growth. I mean, that's ultimately, you're talking about like single digit growth this year. That's how you get to 10, 12, 15% type growth. Margins under control. That's what the bulls want to see. And I think the fact that they actually doubled down on, and I expect clearly on the conference call, they'll focus not just on margins, but more details around that vehicle. Look, Robotaxi Day, we could argue, many would say that they're disappointed. I believe ultimately that shows the vision, the autonomous and the AI vision. Street need to ultimately see, stop talking the talk, walk the walk, show the margins, they did it. And Musk really has, I think, stepped up in that capacity.
In what's been a year of softness for EV demand and obviously more adoption of hybrid vehicles, for example, are we going to look at Q3 as an inflection point for that changing, especially when you look at results like this today? Or is this a Tesla-specific story as they do deploy more manufacturing techniques, more software, more AI, both internally and externally?
I think it's a combination. I mean, you had you look at GM's quarter. I mean, that was a Juan Soto-like quarter for GM. And then you look at what we've seen in terms of Tesla. I believe this is the inflection point. This right now is the start to me of what we're actually starting to see from a gross margin perspective. The renaissance of growth come back. They've essentially been in between two growth waves. Next year, you have a sub 30K vehicle. Then the autonomous and AI vision plays out. And that's, in our opinion, that's how you get to trillion and a half market cap. And right now, as we've seen, like, look, New York City cab drivers bearish on Tesla.
Okay.
And I think that's a good setup relative to what we see in the next 3-4 quarters.
Listen, we got to go, but quickly, Palantir, your reaction to that news?
I mean, that's huge. It just shows doubling down on Carbon Palantir on the defense side. When you think AI in the 202 area code, Palantir really owns that market. The fact that that partnership, just like Microsoft and others, we'll hear more in your interview tomorrow, that's a huge flex the muscles for Palantir and Carp.
All right.